All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Property Players. I'm your host, C Mouzon. Got another great guest here for you. Again, another lady we just got connected on social media. That's becoming a theme for those of you that follow the podcast, because where else are we going to find great people, right? If we're not going out and shaking hands, the other place to go is social media, and you get a chance to run across some really good people that are, again, in the industry, making things happen, have goals, pushing towards those goals. So this is another young lady that I have here with me that, like I said, we just got connected, but excited to hear more of her story and share it with all you listeners. So Miss Sharon Nickey, thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Pleasure's mine. So, over here on Property Players, we just jump straight into it. So I'm just going to go directly in. Tell me a little bit about you. Give me the origin story, right? Leading up to the real estate time. Take me back to where you came from, how you kind of grew up, high school, college, if you did that stuff, and then what led you into real estate.
Wow. Okay. So you want to go back.
Let's go back.
All right. Well, so we go back, let's go back. Let's just go back to high school, because everything before that, I don't really remember too much. But if we just go back to high school, I was always a very talkative, energetic young woman. And I initially wanted to be a supermodel. Now, I am definitely a little bit more advanced in age. So when I was young, Beverly Johnson, Iman, and Grace Jones were models. And I wanted to be them. And I went out on go-sees, and I quickly found out I was not tall enough. I had a very great but plain look. For African-American models at the time, you had to be extraordinarily beautiful, or you had to just be very striking in some way. And you definitely had to be tall, because I was focused on runway modeling, and I didn't have either of those. So, my feelings were hurt. So I just went on about life. I'm still talkative, energetic, went to, high school, graduated, didn't go straight into college, went straight into work, muffled around in a few positions. Administratively, I did some sales in the garment industry. And then I ended up eventually in investment bank. I love to talk, so it was kind of a natural fit. And I also got to be loud, because you have to be loud on the trading floor. And it was the only job as an administrative professional where you had to scream at your boss. So I was in heaven. And by that time, a lot of the money I made, I used to use just for a maid. I used to have a maid come every week. That was my kind of vice, if you want to call it. So I did that for a lot of years, and I'm actually still an administrative professional. But when I was at KPMG, which is a large accounting firm, the partner that I was supporting at the time was retiring. And during my annual review, he knew that I was just finishing up my undergrad at NYU in business. And he knew that I wanted to do something else. And he said, what do you like to do? I said, I like to talk. So he said, you should try real estate. And I was like, okay. And I really didn't think anything of it. I mean, I did think a lot of it. I know he thought it was just part of conversation, but it really impacted me. And I went and investigated and looked at how to get my real estate license. And, I had extra money on my credit card, because you have to have your credit intact when you go back to school. And I went back to school as an adult. So I had, good credit. I had money burning on my credit card. And I said to myself, you know what, get your license. If you make the money back, it costs you to get your license and the 2 suits you bought to interview, then this might be for you. Absolutely. And I did it without any effort. And I didn't even realize until one day I stopped and thought about it. I was like, wow, like I just made back $1,000, like without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
And it was only rentals, but it sparked the interest. I was like, wow, it's something I know how to do. It feeds everything that I love about me. I love to talk. I love to feel important, and I love to help people. So that's how it all started.
That is awesome. That is,
Yes.
and again, it's always important, and I do that because it's important to hear people's story, how they get into the industry, what they see, because everyone sees something different. Everyone has a different experience as they come into, whatever industry that they choose to be in, but specifically real estate. They might see someone. It might just be like from your side, someone just says, "Hey, have you ever thought about getting a real estate license?" And that right there was like, "Oh, maybe actually, let me take a look at that." And you
Right.
found that it was the place for you, right? So
Right.
before that, did you know anyone in real estate? Like even in the investment banking world, was that like common? Did you have a sphere of influence that like was in the real estate side?
Not in the real estate side from the perspective of sales,
Mhm.
but I used to work out of Fidelity Investments. I worked in operations and back office, and I got my Series 6 license. And one of the managers had told me, he said, "You would be a very good salesperson because you like to help people. You don't focus on selling anything, you just want to help people." And I thought about it. And then at the time, they were making straight commission.
Mhm.
And I was definitely afraid of that. I said, you know what? I have no, I cannot do that. I need to have that consistent income to live in New York. It's expensive.
Sure.
And I still had that fear, when I was introduced to real estate. But what I did not realize is nobody said you have to quit your job.
Right.
You can still do it. And I
Right.
mean, I had to really convince a real estate broker in New York to hire me. Like when the first broker that hired me, I really had to convince him
Yeah.
that I was worth, hiring,
Yeah.
because everybody was telling me no.
Mm.
At the time, in
Why?
2000,
Why was it just the industry at the time? Was it you having a job? Like what do you think it was?
it was a combination of both. At the
Yeah.
time, real estate professionals needed to be 100% available, and if you were part-time, you needed to be more available during the weekdays, not just the weekends.
Right.
And it was just a different climate. And it's funny, the broker that I work with now, because I still have a 9 to 5, he said the only reason why he changed his mindset about it, because he did have an agent that was only working part-time and they were making money.
Mm.
And then he started to look, he was like, wait a minute, somebody could just work 20 hours a week and make money if they're consistent.
Mhm.
And it's just amazing how a lot of things have changed. There's a lot more real estate salespeople in New York that have full-time jobs, and not just with my broker, at other firms too,
Yeah.
because it's definitely a change of climate.
Yeah.
The reality.
No, I was gonna say let's talk about that because that's
Yeah.
understanding kind of you've been in the industry for you said about 20 years now, yeah. So you've seen the
Wait a minute, it's 2010.
10,
2010.
so
So I mean, like
11,
that's
10 years,
11.
11,
Okay.
10 years,
All
yeah,
right.
something like that. So not that
Yeah.
far, right? But either
Right.
way,
But
but
that's a long enough view.
exactly. And you've seen a cycle or two, right? Like through there, you've seen the landscape change, you've seen the climate change. So coming into real estate, how has it changed? Like coming in, what was it? Now that you're here, what do you see some of the biggest differences are?
Well, I mean, the biggest differences is, of course, economic cycles. Whenever there's a dip, it gives everyone a chance to change perspective, like we're going through now. So when I first came in, this was right after the big dip in what, 07, 08. I mean, my class was full of mortgage brokers that were making like 200,000 the year before, and now they were just only making 25,000.
Yeah.
I had classmates at NYU. A lot of them had came back to school because marriages had failed, second homes have been foreclosed on. So for a lot of people, it was a disaster. Even my broker that I'm with now, he actually got his license during the whole breakdown.
Wow.
So it was just an opportunity to change. And I feel like I came in on the right time, just because I had a good idea. They saw, my presentation. I convinced them that, and at the time I have a lot of corporate clients. I know corporate people. So, this is what I bring to real estate right now.
Right. And that makes you, that makes you valuable to a broker, right? Like,
right.
At the end of the day, that broker's got to know, like, hey, how are you bringing in business? How do you get clients? Because it can't be all relied on the broker. Like, you have to bring that to the table. So
I'll just clarify. I really didn't, I didn't say I had clients, but what I said, I presented a plan to get clients.
Absolutely.
And that was the thing. As a real estate professional, most brokers are not expecting you to make a lot of money, especially when you're new right out of school. They're not expecting you to make money, but what they are expecting you to do is have some sort of plan, because being a real estate professional it's not a 9-to-5 job. You don't get paid a salary, you don't get paid any benefits. There is some training, but it is very much like the training of, let's say, if you buy a McDonald's franchise, they tell you, okay, these are the type of burgers you have, the buns, but you have to pick your location, you have to pick your marketing strategy. You still have to do all of those things. So that is really what being a real estate professional in New York is. And I will say New York is different in other markets because it constantly changes. The demand is always very high. Yeah. Sometimes it's a buyer's market or a seller's market. Like right now, I feel like it's a toss-up right now because it's probably more weight for buyers, because buyers have, of course, mortgage rates are low. Buyers have more opportunities to put in bids. Sellers, and right now that need to sell, they pretty much have to sell whatever the buyer is saying right now. So it is more of a buyer's market, but if you are a seller, there's a lot of buyers out there.
I'm sure. Like, trust me, I've been talking to, like I said, I have a bunch of people in the industry, and every market's a little bit different, but the consensus across the board is that, like, it's a seller's market right now, right? Like, if you're gonna like put your home up, like, you're gonna get offers within the day or the next day or the week. Right. You're gonna have a bunch on the table.
Right. And I mean, if you're a smart seller and you listen to your real estate professional, you'll put your price down a little bit lower so you can kind of create a frenzy. It's almost like creating your own market. So you put the price down a little bit lower, and then you get a lot of offers, and then people will go over what you're offering. So you can probably get close to what you're asking.
Absolutely. That's a great tip. And that again, working with the right real estate professional is going to help you understand that those sides of what to list on. So, or how to list. Take me to New York 2020. Crazy year, right? Crazy pandemic year.
Woo!
We heard there was a mass exodus, from what I heard, right? Just a bunch of people just getting out of town. What was your experience from an insider in New York during last year's pandemic?
I will say that there was an exodus. See, mass is subjective because apartment sales and rentals were still happening for bigger apartments. And that's the other misconception about New York. There are big apartments here. There are lots of big apartments here, but they're very expensive. Sure. I mean, like now, which is an unusual situation now, there are, let's say, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment in New York, really big and spacious, rents for like 10 grand. Right now, landlords are paying my fee. Before, that was unheard of.
Wow.
Usually when you get into a New York City apartment above $5,000, you're almost guaranteed you're going to pay a broker fee. Right. But now you have some apartments in New York that are, you don't have to pay any fee at all. And I mean, between $10,000 and $25,000. I mean, I double check my email. I'm like, is this right? They're paying my broker fee. And, that's right. One of the extremes in New York. Now, people that are below that, which is a good majority of people, they are, leaving New York, coming out to New Jersey because they're realizing that, one, there's more space. The commute sometimes is actually not as bad because I lived in the Bronx for a couple of years, and my sister, my sublet had went out. So I stayed with my sister in the Bronx. And at the time I was working downtown in Lower Manhattan. And I got to tell you, that train ride from the Bronx to Lower Manhattan was like an hour. Like,
Wow.
it was just a lot. And someone suggested I look in Newark. And they were like, oh, it's 20 minutes into Manhattan on the PATH train. And I tried it and I said, wow, okay. And I thought I was only going to be out here for a year or two and I was going to come back to New York, but I'm still here like 15 years later. And it's great. It's great. It's a very short commute. The few times that, if I want to go out in Manhattan and, in my high heels, I just get in my Uber.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it. That's it. And people pay for, the convenience of it, right? The convenience of making sure that like you can live in a completely different state and still be able to get to New York. And I think that's again a trend that we're seeing happen all over. I used to live in California, right? So I saw a lot of people over in last year in 2020. They moved to Nevada, they moved to Oregon. Like they're just moving like a little bit close outside of the state, but still close to the state. And they know that they could get there if they needed to, or if they had to go back and see family or whatever the case is. They're not that far. And then you have other people that are just moving like completely across the country just to get more room, more land, right? All those things happening. But New York, I know is its own, it's its own beast, right?
Yeah, it's a global city. And, the truth is there are still a lot of opportunities, even in this pandemic. And from a real estate perspective, if you are able to afford New York, this is a great time for, purchasing. It is, prices are very negotiable. If you have the money to buy, let's say like a 4-bedroom house or even a house, a single family house, you can probably get a pretty good deal if you're in that market. And I also want to kind of shift people's perspective on the cost of New York. If you look at New York, historically, African-American people were bought here as property. There are still some historical buildings and places in New York City where we came here as property. I know for a fact in Central Park, there's a certain area in Central Park that was an African-American community that got taken away by eminent domain. And if you think about that, we deserve to be here. Like, we deserve to be here, and through some negotiation, we can figure out a way how to stay here because we rightfully belong right here. I mean, there hasn't a lot of historical content for African-American people. So I am a big fan of New York. I remember just watching Oprah's interview of Cicely Tyson, and she asked her, what brought you the most joy? And she said, my view from my home is Central Park, because I'm overlooking Central Park. She said, when I was a young child, I used to look up at those buildings, and I spent the last 35 years of my life looking over Central Park. It is spectacular and breathtaking. And as African-American people, I think we need to change our mind shift about the cost and think about, you know what? We deserve to live here. And there's enough money in this entire country for us to get it.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I'm pro New York.
I see, and that's awesome, right? Like as you should be, to be honest, right? Like it is a great place. It is a spectacular place to live. There is a ton of history there. It's a global city, right? Like all of those things. It's 100% true. I'm curious, how competitive is the real estate market? Like as agents, as right, like being in the industry. How competitive is it out there?
It's extremely competitive. I mean, like I've had transactions where I've had like 2 listing agents like on my case, like when is your buyer going to close? And I remember one particular case. It was actually in Lower Manhattan. It was just a 1-bedroom, but they had 2 listing agents, and my client, he was using a mortgage. I got him a lower ask because I always get my clients a lower ask, and he was getting a mortgage from Wells Fargo, and Wells Fargo has all of these approvals, and it takes time. And one listing agent kept saying, we're gonna get another buyer. And at first I was a little nervous. I was like, I don't want that to happen. But then I realized, I'm like, all right, if you have a cash buyer, it's still going to take you 45 days to close. Right. So we're already 4 weeks in. So relax. And then all of the harassment stopped. Yeah. Because cash flows is fast. But I mean, if you were telling me that day 10, maybe I might really believe it. But right. When I sat back, I'm like, wait a minute, we're 4 weeks in already.
Exactly.
Like if you bring a cash buyer in, you got to start all over again. And it showed me that he really didn't have anybody. He was just trying to push my buttons.
That's it.
So
you sniff that stuff out after a while.
Right. And a lot of times you really have to think about it in those terms of, unless they say something very specific about you personally, but you do have to think of transactions in terms of people are trying to get paid. Most people that are involved in this transaction are getting paid on full commission. Mm-hmm. So it kind of feeds the monster sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah. It absolutely does, right? Like on this side, I told you I'm in financial services. So in the financial advisor coaching, right, planner, insurance investment side, like same thing, like super cutthroat. At the end of the day, like I have to make sure all of our agents know and all of our clients know, like these are the things you need to know in case somebody comes to you, because inevitably somebody will come to you, try to get you in a new investment, try to change a policy, try to tell you don't know what you have, because that's that's just the mindset of the agents, because they're commission based, right? So they're trying to feed their family or do whatever they got to do. But I know
it's capitalist at its finest. I mean, like, I think a lot of people forget we live in a capitalist society. So whoever does better gets the client. Yeah. And it is just the way it is. It's good and bad. I enjoy it.
Yeah. Now, I would say that you would enjoy it 10 plus years in the end, right? Like what has been the biggest battle for you in the industry? What's been the biggest hurdle? Because you're already naturally, like you said, you're already good at sales or like good at talking, right? You already like that stuff. You already like helping people. What was the hurdle for you in real estate?
That's an interesting question, because I feel like there's several hurdles. And I feel like I'm going through one now. I did get the opportunity to do real estate full time for 2 straight years. At the time I had a boyfriend that supported me. We lived together. He took over the living expenses, so I was able to focus on my business full time. Yeah. And although it wasn't the financial success that I had hoped it to be, it did teach me a lot more. So now making this second transition, going back into it full time, I have much more experience, a better view, and I actually have my numbers. Like, what is my number to leave my 9-to-5 job? What are the things that I need to consistently do to make sure that I have income? And then I've included a real estate blog, which is about, and a lot of people don't realize this, but New York is a huge college town. Lots of people come to New York just for school. Mm-hmm. So and I've had a lot of clients, a lot of college students and parents, they're looking for an apartment, like four girls or whatever, they're all looking for apartments. And I help them find apartments. So I created a blog on how to find an affordable apartment in New York without paying the broker fee. Now, most people, when they think about that broker fee, they're like, oh, I don't want to pay it. Mm-hmm. And when you think about it, when you step back, if you are moving to New York because of school or work, that is an expense that you can write off. Sure. If it's an employer, they potentially may reimburse you for it. I mean, I've had clients that, they've gotten nice jobs. I had one gentleman, actually, he got his dream job as a Facebook engineer. Wow. And part of his package was kind of moving expenses, which included me, like the company paid my fee. Wow. So, that's great. So yeah. I only really worked with rental clients now that are either college students or relocating, because that is the only time that fee, like my fee, makes sense. And plus, it's great now that they changed the rules in New York on the fee. So the maximum we can charge now is 1 month's rent, because there was a time where we were able to charge up to 15%.
Wow.
Yeah. And I gotta say, I did a couple of nice deals in that 15%.
I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I got a new car. I took a trip to Montreal.
Yeah.
I was like, and I knew a couple of other real estate colleagues that didn't do any sales. They were just rental agents, because you can live off rentals in New York.
Yeah.
Like when we were able to charge the 15%, people were, making their 100, 200 just on rentals.
Wow.
Yeah, because I mean, like if you're charging 15% of the yearly rent on 10 grand, 25 grand, you don't need to do no sales.
Exactly. Exactly. Wow. That's different. That's definitely unique, I think, to the New York market, because, I'm in Pennsylvania. There aren't agents that want to do rentals often, right? Like they'll take them, right? Like they'll take them, but like they're not excited about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's a big difference. Market to market. I want to go back to one thing that you said, though, because I think this will help people that are listening, especially people that are in the industry already, but still are trying to transition. That first time that you said you transitioned to full-time real estate, you said you learned some things. What did you learn specifically during that time that helped you understand for the next transition what to do or not to do?
Well, what I learned specifically was sales, because before that, all of my real estate experience was in rentals. It was easy for me to do rentals. And I always recommend people starting out, do rentals first in New York, because it's a much easier transaction. Really, when you look at price per hour of your time, you do make more money doing rentals because it's a quicker transaction. However, sales is a longer transaction. It's more involved. You really have to, I wouldn't say you have to be a mortgage expert, but you do have to be an expert in the flow of the process. What I did learn is you have to quarterback the entire process when you're doing sales. From when you start, when you get the client and show them the properties, they make the offer. And actually, when they make the offer and you put that offer in and it gets accepted, things start to move pretty quickly. So you have to make sure, one, everything that's in your contract, you have enough time to get all of the approvals from the bank. You have to make sure that the client is, putting that 10% or 3% or whatever that deposit is. You have to make sure whatever approval deadlines that the bank has, that the seller has, you have to make sure all of those things are working together. And sometimes things can go crazy. I mean, I had situations where I had to go to a property manager's office to look at condo meeting notes, because the attorney said he wouldn't do it.
Wow.
And I just had to make sure. So, any and everything can go wrong or right. And as far as banks, you have to really stay on top of the bank and see where the approval process is, because the bigger the bank, the longer that process will take. Smaller banks sometimes, and I've had really good situations with smaller banks. Smaller banks sometimes don't need all of the heavy numbers for, let's say, a co-op board that a Wells Fargo or Citibank will need. So sometimes that's a way to get around things.
Got it.
So I would say I just learned a lot more. I learned a lot more about the sales process in my 2 years full time. And then I also learned a lot about different historical neighborhoods. That was the one thing doing rentals, you really don't have to know that. But in sales, you do have to know historical neighborhoods, because that can put a premium on an apartment or a house.
That's big, right? And so that learning curve for you, really, stepping out, how did you learn all those things? Was it just like as it came, you're like, oh, I really don't know? Like, did you get your first, right, like listing or whatever, and you're just like, oh, I don't know half of this stuff, so I'm letting you learn? Do you have someone holding your hand through it? How did you actually learn that stuff?
It was a combination. Like some transactions I learned through my broker. that I was working with, because he would take me out on listing appointments, and I would learn a lot there. I remember one thing in particular I learned about, two things, was exposure. Southern exposure is the best exposure, and that's really all around. But in New York, there are laws called sun laws that you have to pay a premium for an apartment or a house facing south, because you get sun from sunrise to sunset. And then, and I've never had to do this, but you can get a zoning analysis to make sure that no developer has development rights to build a building in front of you to take away your view. It's very expensive to do that. I mean, like, that could be like just $1,500 to do that. Yeah. But, you know, if you really want to make sure that you're always going to be guaranteed this view, you can do that. So some of it I learned from my broker. Some of it I learned as things came up in, you know, some of the sales transaction. I remember I did a transaction in Sunnyside, Queens, and found this really cute co-op on the top floor. So it had a little bit of a city view. And me and my client were just looking at the front of the building, and this woman comes out and she's like, "You don't want to move in here. This is a terrible building." And she said all kind of horrible things. And luckily my client is an entrepreneur. And he was like, "You know what? Let's make the appointment. Let's see the apartment." And then we found out when we got closer to closing that she was one of the board members. And she wanted to make sure that anybody moving into the building was going to pay a certain price. Wow. But I was glad that my client didn't get freaked out about it. Yeah. And that's the benefit sometimes of dealing with other entrepreneurs. Like, they expect something a little bit out of the box to happen.
Mm-hmm. We're always waiting for it, because we know that that's what's going to happen anyway, right? Nothing just goes smoothly all the way till the end. So you're just anticipating it. So that's good. Do you have a specific niche? I know you said, right, rentals on the college side, but in the sales side, do you have a niche? Do you just work with entrepreneurs? Is there something that you look for?
No, I mean, right now, 2020 changed a lot for me. So 2020, like, nothing happened for me in 2020. So that was why my broker said, you know, maybe consider getting your license in Newark, because you live there, you know the area, and it's having the same kind of renaissance that Brooklyn had without moving everyone out. Sure. So it's more of an inclusive, it's a more inclusive upgrade, I'll say. And it's a lot of great things happening out here. It is very investor friendly for almost anybody, I should say, because you can get a let's say like a 2-family here in Newark that's in pretty decent condition. Probably, I want to say between $300 and $500. Whereas New York, $300 or $500, you're really looking at a studio.
Right.
And in Manhattan, maybe like a 300 square foot commercial space. So, you know, it depends on where you are price point. I mean, like, if you are, you know, even if you are a, you know, you just happen to hit the lottery. Yeah. Like, if you hit the lottery for $25 million, you could really do well in New York. You can get you a nice house in New York, because you can come in and, you know, something can ask for $5 million. You're like, look, I'll give you 3. Right. And they probably will take it.
Right.
And I mean, that is a deal. That's a deal right now. That's a really good deal. Like, when you think of it, that's almost more than 50% off the price.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's just, when you think of price, you have to think of terms of percentages sometimes. Like, all right, so I have this amount of money, like, can I get it down like 60%? And if you got enough cash in it, you can. But Newark is, you know, I would say more acceptable for all different price points.
Right. It makes sense. It makes sense. But, you know, for people that are listening right now, you can see that these are market specific things. Like, that's why it's so important to work with a good, you know, real estate professional that knows your market, that understands kind of what's happening, so that you're getting the best deals. You're doing right. You're buying the best location, or whatever the case is, depending on what you're doing. So
right, that's probably where I'm leaning more toward for a target in Newark, is probably investment, because they're still really building up the infrastructure here in Newark. But there are some really great places to live in Newark. It's just a matter of, what you want to do, because you almost have to think in terms of kind of rebuilding or changing a structure here in Newark, because there are apartment buildings, but there are not a lot of condos. I mean, it's very few condos. And I found out the reason why is the government, the state doesn't give the developers incentives to do condos. And I really feel like that should change, because there could be such an exodus there is an exodus from New York to New Jersey. I know the town next to us, which is Harrison, they pretty much rebuilt that town just off of that 20-minute ride from New York to New Jersey. And now it's flooded with New Yorkers. I mean, it's mainly rentals, but I feel like there's enough small like townhouses nearby for people to consider. So hopefully in some coming years, they start to see the demand for condos in Newark, and they start to do something about it. But like I said, you can get like a 2-family, 3-4 family, and you can do some amazing things, if you really want to put the time and energy. And it's a much more affordable process. I mean, it's more time consuming, but it's a much more affordable process. And at the end, you can really end up with a nice product, build your family wealth, have some immediate additional income. You definitely have a lot of tax write-offs you can consider.
Absolutely. I always encourage, all our clients, the people that we talk to, like real estate as an asset class, like as if you're investing in real estate, one of the greatest asset classes, right? Just from all those things that you just said, right? The wealth building aspect, the appreciation, the depreciation on your taxes, right? Like the whole nine. It's just a great asset class to be able to invest in. And now we're seeing that things are popping up and people are becoming more savvy to getting second homes, or getting the duplex, or multiple doors, so that they can create this cash flowing asset. And so we're seeing this happen all over. And now you're talking about it, just another part of the country in Newark, where it's going to be probably, again, people are going to come in, there's going to be tons of investment opportunities, in a way to build wealth and really make some money for you and your family. So that's, those are the things that I always want, especially the listeners, to pay attention to, is like, hey, where are the white spaces in the industry? What is it that, we're moving towards? And as we wrap up, this will be like my last question for you. Where do you think the industry is headed? What are you seeing? If I say fast forward to 2022, 2023, where are we as a society, as a market, when it comes to real estate?
That's very interesting. I definitely see in Newark a lot of appreciation, just because there's so much opportunity out here from a real estate perspective. And the city of Newark as a whole is doing a lot to include the residents. They just created a real estate bank, a land bank. So you can go in and, the city still owns a lot of property and land. You can go in and say, hey, I see, you got a plot of land here, and it's already, most of it is zoned, of course, residential. I think you can probably get away with some lip work spaces, because, if it's mostly residential, you can have a little bit of commercial, but you can't do it the other way around.
Right.
And, they're willing to work with the residents to do that. And of course, there's all kinds of programs out here in Newark for people, to buy homes. You don't have to be a millionaire to buy a home. Honestly, I feel like the less you have, the more help you can get sometimes.
It's very true. It's very true. They're making it very, very, they're going to make it easier and easier for us to be able to buy homes, right? They're going to make it easier and easier for people to be able to purchase and, go down that process. The home buying process really does, and banks run off of mortgages, right? The government needs the tax dollars. Like all of it helps our economy, helps our, us run this society. So they're going to make it easier and easier for people to get it. And yet people that are maybe not in the, the best, financial, I guess, well-being, I guess, they're still going to have the opportunity to purchase a home and start to create some wealth and build wealth. So that's why it's just important to get educated during these times.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you look at the current administration, they're trying to really do some things about systemic racism. And then there's also always going to be a lot of opportunities for first-time home buyers, no matter, what age, what income bracket you are. If you're a first-time home buyer, there's like a ton of programs for first-time home buyers. So there's really a lot of opportunity. It's just sometimes I feel like you have to just widen your view and say, all right, this is what I have. And I feel like it's the wonderful thing about social media, because it lets you see a lot of what's out there. Because, even though social media does have some bad connotation, I feel like you have control over your timeline, who you follow, what's coming in. So if you're following the right people, and it doesn't always have to be, like a CNN, but, follow your government, your local government, and then Instagram will give you all of the like people under that. So you start to follow people, that are giving out information. There's so much information. Sometimes it's overwhelming, and a lot of times it doesn't get advertised. Just really quickly, I had owed the IRS government a huge amount of money. I took out my 401k. I didn't know that was a tax, situation. And I took the money out, and I ended up owing like something like $30,000. And I was like, oh crap, I'm never going to be able to pay that. So I found a tax attorney, and he told me about this offer in compromise. And I looked it up, and I was like, whoa, and it's public, but it doesn't get advertised. It doesn't get advertised. So sometimes it just requires just a little research. Like if you just go on like your local government's website and look under housing, you'd be surprised how much information you can find. Like my current apartment now, I found it on NewJersey.gov. Like that's where I found. I didn't, I looked at Craigslist and all the other rent hop, but I found this on NewJersey.gov. Like it's unbelievable how much information is out there. So sometimes you just have to take a non-traditional look.
Absolutely. And you're 100% right on that. And I try to preach this message. And for anyone that's a self-starter and wants to get going, like there's all the information you need is out there. YouTube University is amazing. You'll find all the different websites where you can find things. And the important part was, one of the things that you did is, after you got a little bit of information, you sought a professional though. You got the tax attorney.
Oh yeah.
And then the tax attorney gave you more information to point you in the right direction. And that's when it clicked. That's what I think is needed right now. My thesis, like being in financial services, you being in the real estate side, there's all this information out there about money, about how to do it. But now what we're doing is we're lacking some guidance. We're lacking some wisdom, because there's actually too much information, right? There's too much, because everyone has a voice. Everyone can say. So now it just, this, like you said, it's overwhelming when you start going down the process, because this website takes you to this website, that contradicted that, your cousin told you this, but this says this, right? And now you have no idea, and then analysis paralysis, then you just don't do anything, right? So finding that professional in what you're looking for is going to be so key. Yes, you can get the information, but then the professional is going to be able to guide you how to use that information properly in order to get to where you want to be. So that's a huge point.
Yeah, because oftentimes most professionals will give you a free consultation, and honestly, you can get a lot of information out of that free consultation
if you come to them.
You can move forward or not, and like depending on your situation, the other party might get paid through the other party.
Once you have the information, you can then just go take it to someone and be like, hey, what do I do with this? And like you said, most people will give you a free consultation. You'll get a free 15 or 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And if you come with questions and you come with research, you've already done the work, and that's not your first step thinking they're going to give you everything you need. You can actually utilize those consultations and things to get where you need to be. You might not even have to pay them, right? I always advocate, like, you should pay for a good service, but at the end of the day, you might not have to if you just get the information beforehand, go to them, cross-reference, and then they can guide you down the right path, you know?
Right, right. And I do try to, sometimes when I have enough free time, offer people like a free 15 or 30-minute chat with me just to find out, like, what do I need to do? Because sometimes a lot of people get so overwhelmed with the real estate process, because they think, oh, I don't have enough money, or I only have like, $200,000. I won't be able to do anything with that. But you know what? You may be able to do something with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So,
And then there's always ways of fixing everything. You can have a 500 credit score. We can get you with a credit person. We can figure out exactly what needs to be fixed, because it's not always about getting everything to zero, because sometimes that's bad.
exactly. People don't even know that side of things on the credit side, right? Like, maybe it's not the best thing to always pay everything off. Sometimes it's
right.
You might just want to pick up some extra trade lines or something like that. You
Exactly.
never know, right? So
exactly.
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yes.
Wrapping up, where can people find you? Because obviously, Sharon, you got a wealth of knowledge. You're obviously in the New York, New Jersey area, and people can come see you. People should go see you and get that 15-minute consultation, or just a phone call, or just reach out and see what you have going on. So where can people find you?
Well, I'm definitely on Instagram. It's Sharon Nickey, and that's SharonNickey. And people can call me. My phone number is 917-407-7789. Texting is my friend, so I'm really okay with text. You can call, but texting is good. And you can send me an email. It's Sharon at Crum Real Estate, and Crum is CRUM realestate.com.
Awesome.
So those are the main places to find me.
Awesome. We'll link it up in the show notes. So for those of you listening, you can click there and just get a chance to reach out to Sharon. Because like I said, and what you've heard already, is that she has a wealth of knowledge. She understands her market. She understands how to help you get to where you want to be, whether that's rental, whether that's selling, whatever it is. If you're going to be on the investing side, obviously she'll be able to help. So reach out to her, guys. Reach out to her. Sharon, I appreciate you taking the time today. It's been awesome. We had a great conversation, and know that I'm here, I'm around. So anything that you need or any of your clients need, we're here to make sure, like we said, kind of going into this, that we're just helping each other out, continuing to grow, continuing to get the message out there, and really just give people the value that they need. So thank you so much for taking your time to jump on today.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I love talking. So
absolutely. Maybe we'll have you back on another season and give you another chance to talk.
Yeah, after I get my real estate license, maybe we can do an update in like a year. Like, how's it going?
That might be. Matter of fact, that's a plan, right? We're gonna do it. We're gonna make that happen next year. Definitely. We'll jump in and do like an update of where you're at and what you've learned through this 2021 time. Okay.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much again, Chris.
Pleasure is mine. And again, for everyone that's listening, we're signing off for another week of Property Players. Guys, go out there, stay well, be blessed. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you.